When you think of Disney, you probably imagine magic, happily ever after, and beloved characters. Fairy tales as old as time, right? But what if I told you Disney's versions are only half the story? But the truth behind Disney's most iconic films is far darker than you might realize. Beneath the surface of these family-friendly classics lie gruesome and tragic stories that Disney reshaped to fit its vision. Today, we're peeling back the glittering curtain of Disney magic to uncover the dark truths Disney doesn't want you to know, and honestly, I don't blame them. Before Disney made them magical, fairy tales weren't written to entertain children. They were moral lessons, often harsh ones, meant for adults. These stories reflected the brutal realities of the times and the consequences of disobedience or vanity. Let's start with Hans Christian Andersen's original tale, The Little Mermaid, one of Disney's most iconic adaptations. Hans Christian Andersen's original tale reveals a much darker narrative than the Disney version. The Little Mermaid lives in an undersea kingdom ruled by her father, the Sea King. As the youngest of 6 sisters, she is curious and captivated by the world above the water. However, mermaids are forbidden to visit the surface until they turn 15, a rule set by their father. As the Little Mermaid waits for her turn, she listens intently to her grandmother and sister's tales of the human world. One day, she asks her grandmother an unsettling question. Do humans live forever? The grandmother explains that while humans live much shorter lives than mermaids, they possess immortal souls that ascend to the heavens after death. Mermaids, on the other hand, live for 300 years but dissolve into sea foam when they die, leaving nothing behind. This revelation ignites the Little Mermaid's desire, not just for the human world, but for a soul of her own. At last, on her 15th birthday, the Little Mermaid is allowed to swim to the surface. She witnesses a grand ship and is immediately enchanted by the young prince on board. When a violent storm wrecks the ship, she rescues the unconscious prince, bringing him safely to shore. She hides nearby as a young woman from a nearby temple finds the prince, who believes she is his savior. The Little Mermaid visits the Sea Witch. The Sea Witch offers her a potion to transform her tail into legs, but the price is steep. Every step she takes on land will feel like walking on knives, causing her feet to bleed. Worse, if the prince marries another, the Little Mermaid will die the next morning and dissolve into sea foam. To seal the deal, the Sea Witch demands the most precious thing the Little Mermaid has: her voice. Known for its unparalleled beauty, the Little Mermaid's voice is taken as the Sea Witch cuts out her tongue. The witch warns her, once you drink the potion, you can never return to the sea. The Little Mermaid drinks the potion and endures excruciating pain as her tail splits into legs. The next morning, the prince finds her on the shore and takes her in. The prince allows her to sleep on a velvet cushion outside his bedroom door and brings her along on his adventures, including horseback riding and mountain climbing. Each activity causes her unbearable pain, but she hides her suffering. The prince announces his engagement to another woman, the very one he believes saved him from the shipwreck. The Little Mermaid is devastated, but attends the wedding, forced to dance despite the feeling of knives piercing her feet. She goes to take one last look at the ocean before she dies in the morning, when her sisters appear with a desperate solution. They have traded their hair to the Sea Witch for a magical knife. If the Little Mermaid takes the prince's life and lets his blood drip on her feet, she can return to being a mermaid. Standing over the sleeping prince, she cannot bring herself to harm him. She throws the knife into the sea, where it dissolves into red mist. She jumps into the water, expecting to dissolve into sea foam, but feels the warmth of the sun instead. She is greeted by the daughters of the air, ethereal beings who explain her fate. Mermaids, they say, do not have immortal souls, but through her selfless actions, she has earned a chance at redemption. In the 1634 collection, The Pentamerone by Giambattista Basile, often referred to as the first collection of fairy tales, there is a story titled La Gatta Cenerentola, or The Cat Cinderella. This version of the Cinderella tale is perhaps the darkest and most twisted iteration of the story ever recorded. The protagonist, Zezola, is the daughter of an Italian prince whose wife has recently died. Her father remarries, but instead of the wicked stepmother trope, the antagonist role belongs to Zezola's governess. The governess, who is infatuated with Zezola's father, devises a horrifying plan. She manipulates the young girl into ending her stepmother's life, convincing her that she would be a far better mother and that this would win her father's favor. Tragically, Zezola complies, slamming a trunk lid on her stepmother's neck. After the mourning period, Zezola persuades her father to marry the governess, and her new stepmother quickly takes over. But there's a shocking twist. The new stepmother has 6 children of her own, whom she secretly brings into the household after the wedding. These children immediately take precedence over Zezola in every way. Her father, oblivious to his own daughter's suffering, forgets about her entirely. Her life quickly becomes miserable. She is forced to sleep by the hearth, earning her the new name La Gatta Cenerentola, the Cat Cinderella. One day, on the occasion of her father's 3rd wedding, Zezola is visited by a little white dove, which tells her, "Whenever you need anything, send your request to the Dove of the Fairies on the island of Sardinia, and you will have what you wish." Coincidentally, her father soon travels to Sardinia. She asks him to relay her message. When he returns, he brings her gifts from the fairies. Zezola plants the date tree and cares for it as if it were her own child. In just a few days, the tree grows tall and a fairy emerges from it, offering to grant Zezola's wishes. Zezola wishes to leave her house without being recognized by her family. The fairy grants her request and provides her with beautiful clothes that disguise her identity. Zezola attends a royal festival where she catches the king's eye. Like other Cinderella stories, the event lasts 3 days, and on the final night, she loses her slipper. The slipper is gold in this version. The glass slipper comes from a later version we will get to. The king, determined to find her, searches the land, and when he arrives at Zezola's home, the slipper magically leaps onto her foot, proving she is the rightful owner. The king marries her, and Zezola finally escapes her abusive household. Her stepsisters sneak away to complain about the king's bad taste in marrying her, and the story ends abruptly without addressing their behavior. If you're enjoying the video so far, don't forget to leave a like. It really helps out the channel. Thank you. Our next story is Charles Perrault's 1697 French version of Cinderella, titled Cendrillon, ou La Petite Pantoufle de Verre, Cinderella, or the little glass slipper. The story begins with a widower who has a daughter. Unfortunately, he marries a horrible woman with two rude, selfish daughters of her own. Cinderella's new stepfamily treats her terribly, forcing her to do all the chores and sleep in the attic on a bale of hay. They mock her with cruel nicknames like Cinderwench and Cinderella, refusing to call her by her real name, which is never revealed. Sadly, Cinderella can't tell her father because he's so infatuated with his new wife that he sides with her no matter what. One day, the king announces that his son will hold a grand ball to find a bride. While Cinderella's stepsisters get ready for the event, she's left to help them. But as soon as they leave, she breaks down in tears. This is when her fairy godmother appears, not in the whimsical, sparkly way we know from Disney's version, but in a more straightforward and practical manner, asking, "Why are you crying?" The events that follow align closely with the Disney version. Her fairy godmother magically transforms a pumpkin into a carriage, mice into horses, and her ragged clothes into a stunning ball gown paired with iconic glass slippers. At the ball, Cinderella catches the prince's eye and he quickly falls for her. But when the clock strikes midnight, she must leave immediately per her godmother's orders. The first night, she gets away, just in time. On the second night, however, she rushes so quickly that she loses one of her glass slippers on the palace steps. The prince picks up the shoe and announces that he will marry the woman whose foot fits it perfectly. The next morning, the prince sends his servants to find the slipper's rightful owner. When they arrive at Cinderella's home, her stepsisters fail miserably at fitting into the shoe. Cinderella then volunteers to try it on. To the messenger's surprise, the slipper fits perfectly. Cinderella's fairy godmother arrives and transforms her servant clothes into an even more beautiful outfit, solidifying her identity. Shortly after, she marries the prince. Interestingly, this version of the story ends with Cinderella forgiving her stepsisters. She arranges for them to marry wealthy lords, and everyone lives happily ever after. While Perrault's story introduced iconic elements like the glass slippers, pumpkin carriage, and fairy godmother, the general structure of the Cinderella story has existed in countless cultures for centuries. The Brothers Grimm's Aschenputtel from 1812 is a much darker interpretation of the tale. This German version features grisly scenes where the stepsisters go to horrifying lengths to claim the slipper. A wealthy man loses his wife, who, on her deathbed, tells their only daughter to remain good and pious. The man eventually remarries, but his new wife is cruel and brings two daughters with her. Cinderella's stepsisters were beautiful but cruel. They berated her, treated her like a slave, refused to feed her unless she earned her meals, and took away her dresses, jewelry, and even the furniture in her room. With no bed to sleep on, she was forced to rest by the fireplace, leaving her covered in dust and cinders, hence the name Cinderella. One day, Cinderella made an unusual request. She asked her father to bring her the first twig that hit his hat on his way home. He granted her wish, and Cinderella planted the twig at her mother's grave in the backyard. Every day, she watered it 3 times with her tears. Over time, the twig grew into a beautiful tree where birds made their home. These birds became her companions, much like the animals in Disney's adaptation. In exchange for Cinderella caring for them, the birds brought her anything she wished for, a detail that would play an important role later. Meanwhile, in the kingdom, the royal family announced a festival in the prince's honor. Just like in Disney's version, every beautiful girl in the kingdom was invited so the prince could choose his bride. The festival lasted for 3 nights. Naturally, Cinderella wanted to attend, but her stepmother was determined to stop her. As a test, the stepmother threw a bowl of lentils into the fireplace ashes and told Cinderella she could only go to the festival if she picked them all up within 2 hours. Desperate, Cinderella called out to the birds, who helped her complete the impossible task in half an hour. Furious that her plan had failed, the stepmother repeated the challenge with 2 bowls of lentils, this time giving Cinderella just 90 minutes. Once again, the birds came to her rescue. But despite completing the task, the stepmother still forbade Cinderella from attending. After her stepmother and stepsisters left for the festival, Cinderella turned to the magical tree she had nurtured all this time. She recited a poem saying, little tree, shake over me so that silver and gold may come down and cover me." The birds brought her a stunning dress embroidered with silver and gold, as well as golden slippers. But it seems the tree acted as the original fairy godmother. Dressed in her beautiful attire, Cinderella went to the festival and immediately caught the prince's attention. He danced with her all night, but when he offered to escort her home, she fled to protect her identity. The prince followed her, but she escaped by hiding in a pigeon coop in her backyard. The second night of the festival played out similarly, though this time Cinderella wore an even more dazzling dress. When the prince tries to escort her home once again, she fled, hiding this time in a pear tree. On the third and final night, Cinderella's dress was the most beautiful of all. However, the prince, determined to discover her identity, set a trap. He had the palace stairs covered in pitch, a sticky sap-like substance, and as Cinderella ran away, one of her golden slippers got stuck. The prince seized the slipper, vowing to find its rightful owner. The next morning, the prince began his search. When he arrived at Cinderella's house, the stepsisters were eager to try on the slipper. The older sister found her big toe was too large, so on her mother's advice, she cut it off and forced her foot into the slipper. The prince was fooled initially, but noticed blood dripping from the shoe and realized she wasn't the girl from the festival. The younger stepsister then tried the slipper, but her heel was too big. Desperate, she cut off part of her heel. But once again, the prince saw the blood and rejected her. Finally, Cinderella was brought forward. The slipper fit perfectly, and she left with the prince to begin her happily ever after. But the story didn't end there. The stepsisters, disappointed but still scheming, decided to attend Cinderella's wedding. They likely hoped to gain favor with her or take advantage of her new royal status. However, Cinderella's loyal birds had other plans. As the sisters walked to the castle, the birds swooped down and pecked out their eyes, leaving them blind for the rest of their lives. Don't you just love a happy ending? Disney reimagined these tales for a modern audience, but the originals, they were a whole new world. So why did Walt Disney choose such dark and grim tales to transform into his animated classics? The answer lies in his vision. Walt once said, "I would rather entertain and hope that people learned something than educate people, and hope they were entertained." His approach turned these dark, cautionary tales into uplifting narratives. As animation grew in popularity, Walt realized that audiences craved stories that offered hope and escapism. The Great Depression left people longing for light-hearted entertainment, not reminders of life's hardships. Disney also knew that success depended on appealing to a broader audience, particularly families. By softening the harsh edges of his early work, he created a brand synonymous with magic and joy. The lessons Disney and his team learned about animation techniques, emotional storytelling, and audience engagement laid the foundation for groundbreaking classics like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Disney didn't just adapt these stories, he redefined them. By removing the pain and moral punishment, he shifted the focus to themes of hope, perseverance, and magic. This approach wasn't just about entertainment, it was about building a brand that represented the ultimate escape from reality. Thank you for joining me for this story. Until next time, stay mystical. If you've made it this far and enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like. It really helps spread the word about the channel. And subscribe to be part of our growing community of mystic seekers and join us on our next adventure. My question today is, which version of the story do you prefer, Disney's or the original? This will be a series, so let me know which story you would like to see next. Thanks for watching.